Marley was dead. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it. And Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to.
Old Marley was as dead as a doornail.
Mind you, I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have thought a coffin nail the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors lies in the simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the country's done for.
You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead.
Well, of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole friend, and sole mourner. And even old Scrooge was not so cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. Now this must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I'm going to relate. Scrooge never painted out Marley's name. There it stood years afterwards above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marley's. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley's. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge and Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. He answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out harshly in his grating voice. He carried his own low temperature about him always, and didn't thaw it 1 degree at Christmas. Nobody ever stopped him in the streets to say with gladsome looks,
My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?
No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what o'clock it was. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind men's dogs seemed to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their masters in the doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tails as though they said, "Hoof, hoof, no eye at all is better than a hoof, evil eye, dark master." But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to wend his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, and foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warm them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was dark already. It had not been light all day, and the candles were flaring in the windows of the neighboring offices. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole, and was so dense without that although the court was of the narrowest, the houses opposite were mere phantoms. Scrooge sat with the door of his counting house open, that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, was copying letters. Scrooge's fire was very small, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. "Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew. "A humbug! Christmas, a humbug? Oh, you don't mean that, Uncle, I'm sure." "I do. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Well, come then. What right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough." "Ah, humbug! Don't be cross, Uncle. What else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas! Out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer. Every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should. Uncle, nephew, keep Christmas in your way and let me keep it in mine." "Keep it? But you don't keep it." "Well, let me leave it alone then. Much good may it do you. Much good it has ever done you." "Well, there are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say, Christmas among the rest. But I have always thought of Christmas time when it comes around as a good time, a kind, giving, charitable, pleasant time, and the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pockets, I believe it has done me good, and will do me good, and I say, God bless it." The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded. Becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety, he poked his fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. "Let me hear another sound from you, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation." "You're a powerful speaker, sir. It's a wonder you don't go into Parliament." "Oh, don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow." "Good afternoon." "I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?" "Good afternoon. I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute, but I will keep my Christmas humor to the last. And so a Merry Christmas, Uncle. Good afternoon, and a happy good afternoon, New Year." His nephew left the room without an angry word, but in stepping out, he allowed a stranger to step in. He was a portly gentleman, and he now stood with his hat off in Scrooge's office. "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "Mr. Marley's been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night." "I have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we provide some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time." "Are there no prisons?" "Plenty of prisons, sir." "The workhouses, they are still in operation?" "They are. Still, I wish I could say they were not." "The poor law and treadmill are in full vigor then?" "Oh, very busy, sir." "Well, from what you said at first, I was afraid something had happened to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it. A few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. What should I put you down for? Nothing. You wish to be anonymous. I wish to be left alone. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help support the establishments I mentioned. They cost enough. And those that are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. Well, if they had rather die, they had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. Good afternoon. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue his point, the gentleman withdrew. And Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself, and in a more facetious humor than was usual. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived, and with an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who immediately snuffed out his candle. You'll be wanting the whole day tomorrow, I suppose. If at all convenient, sir. It's not convenient, and it's not fair. You'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound, if I was to stop at £half for it. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work. It's only once a year, sir. Poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here only earlier the next morning. The clerk promised that he would, and he ran home to Camden Town as fast as he could pelt to play it blind man's bluff. Scrooge took his usual melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern and went home to bed. He lived in chambers that had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms and dreary, for nobody lived in them but Scrooge. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all in particular about the knocker on the door, except it was very large. And let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought upon Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. And now, let anyone explain to me, if they can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, not a knocker, but Marley's face. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up upon its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That, and its livid color, made it horrible. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say he was not startled would be untrue, but he put his hand on the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, and lighted his candle. He did pause with a moment's irresolution before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as though he half expected to be terrified by the sight of Marley's pigtails sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on. So he said, "Pooh, pooh," and he closed it with a bang. He fastened the door, walked across the hall, and up the stairs, slowly, to trimming his candle as he went. Now, half a dozen gas lamps out of the street would not have lighted Scrooge's entry too well, so you may suppose it was pretty dark with his candle. But up Scrooge went, not caring a button for that. Darkness is cheap. And he liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, number room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table. Nobody under the sofa. Little fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, small saucepan of gruel. Nobody under the bed. Nobody in the closets. Nobody in the dressing gown. Quite satisfied, Scrooge locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus, secured against surprise, he took off his hat, his coat, put on his dressing gown, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. But as he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose, now forgotten, to a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment and a strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly at the outset that it scarcely made a sound. But soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This lasted for perhaps a half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun, together. And they were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as though some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and now the noise was heard much louder on the floors below. Now coming up the stairs, now coming straight towards his door. It's up, but still I won't believe it. His color changed, though, when without a pause it came on through the heavy door and passed through before his eyes. The dying flame leaped up as though it said, I know him, Marley's ghost, and fell again. Who are you? Ask me who I was. Well, who were you then? In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. Can you sit down? I can. Do it then. You don't believe in me. I don't. What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses? I don't know. Why do you doubt your senses? Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may
maybe an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. Do you see this toothpick? I have but to swallow this, and be for the rest of my days persecuted by a legion of goblins, all of my own making. It's humbug, I tell you, humbug. Mercy, dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me? Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not? I do. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do they come to me? It is required of every man that the spirit within him walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to walk the world. Oh, woe is me! And witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turned to happiness. You are in chains. Tell me why? I wear the chains I forged in life. I made them link by link, yard by yard. I girded them on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore them. Is their pattern strange to you, or would you know the length and weight of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full, as heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain. Oh, speak comfort to me, Jacob. I have none to give. Oh, captive and bound, not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one life's opportunities misused. But such was I, oh, such was I. You were always a good man of business, Jacob. Business! Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, benevolence were all my business. At this time of year I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down? My time's almost gone. Hear me! I will, but don't be hard upon me, Jacob, pray. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate. You were always a good friend to me, thank you. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Is that the chance and hope you spoke of? It is. I think I'd rather not. Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tonight when the bell tolls 1. Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over? Expect the second on the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more. And look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us.
The apparition walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that by the time the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to follow, which he did. When they were within 2 paces of one another, Marley's ghost held up its hand, warning Scrooge to come no further. He stopped, not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear. For upon the raising of the hand, he became conscious of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge, and floated out into the bleak, dark night. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he himself had locked it with his own hands. He tried to say, hum, hum, hum,
but stopped at the first syllable.
and being from the emotion he had undergone, much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his room. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. He listened for the hour. Possibly have slept through the whole day and far into another night. Scrooge thought about it over and over and could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed he became. And the more he endeavored not to think, the more he thought that Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge lay in this state until he remembered that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past. 1/4 past. 1/2 past. 1/4 to it. The hour itself. And nothing else. He spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did, with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1. Light flashed up in the room at the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand. And Scrooge now found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, for the hair which hung about its neck and down its back was white as if with age. And and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it. The arms were long and muscular, the same the hands, as though its whole were of uncommon strength. The legs and feet, most delicately formed, were bare. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and had, bound round its waist, a lustrous belt. In its hand it held a branch of fresh green holly, and had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a clear, bright jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using a great extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under its arm. "Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?" "I am." "Who and what are you?" "I am the ghost of Christmas past." "Long past?" "No, your past. Rise and walk with me." Scrooge rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, "I am mortal and liable to fall." "Bear but a touch of my hand there, and you shall be upheld in more than this." As the words were spoken, they passed on through the wall, and stood upon an open country road with fields on either side. It was a cold, clear winter day, with snow upon the ground. Good heavens, I was born in this place. I was a boy here. Scrooge became conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected to 1,000 thoughts, hopes, joys, and cares, long, long forgotten. Your lip is trembling, and what is that on your cheek? A pimple. Do you recollect the way? Remember it? I could walk it blindfold. Strange to have forgotten it for so many years. Let us go on. They walked along the road, Scrooge remembering every tree, post, and gate, until a little market town appeared in the distance with its bridge, its church, its winding river. And now some shaggy ponies were seen trotting on towards them, with boys on their backs, who were in great spirits and called out to one another until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it. These are but shadows of the things that have been. They have no consciousness of us. As the travelers came on, Scrooge knew and named them every one. Why was he rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them? Why did his cold eye glisten and his heart leap up as they went past? Why was he filled with such gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmas? What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas! What good had it ever done to him? The school is not quite deserted. One solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still. Scrooge said he knew it, and he saw it. They left the high road by a well-remembered lane, and soon approached a mansion of dull red brick. It was a huge house, but one of broken fortunes, for the spacious offices were seldom used. And now a door opened at the back of the house before them, and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made bare still with lines of plain desks. At one of these, a lonely boy was reading before a feeble fire. And Scrooge sat down and wept to see his poor forgotten self as he used to be. The spirit touched him upon the arm and pointed to his younger self, intent upon his reading. Suddenly, a man in foreign garments, wonderfully real and distinct to look at, stood outside the window with an axe stuck in his belt, leading a donkey laden with wood by the bridle.
Why, it's Alibaba! It's dear old honest Alibaba! Yes, I know. One Christmas time when yonder solitary boy was left here all alone, he did come for the first time just like that. There's a parrot, the green body and a yellow tail, and a thing like a lettuce growing out of its head. Oh, poor Robinson Crusoe. There goes Friday running for his life to the little creek. Oh, hello! Poor boy. I wish that... Oh, it's too late now.
What is the matter?
Nothing. Nothing. Well, it's just... There was a boy singing a Christmas carol outside my door last night. I should like to have given him something. That's all.
Let us see another Christmas.
Scrooge's former self grew larger at the words, and the room became darker and more dirty. He was alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays. He was not reading this time, but was walking up and down despairingly.
Scrooge glanced at the ghost and with a mournful shaking of his head looked anxiously towards the door. It opened, and a little girl much younger than the boy came darting in and addressed him as...
My dear, dear brother, I've come to bring you home, dear brother. To bring you home. Home!
Home, little Fan?
Yes, home. Home for good and all. Home forever and ever. Father's so much kinder than he used to be. Home's like heaven now. He spoke so gently to me one dear night as I was going to bed, that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should. And he sent me in a coach to bring you. And we're to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in the world.
You're quite a woman, little Fan. She laughed and clapped her hands and tried to touch his head. But being too little, she laughed again and stood on tiptoes to embrace him. And then she began to drag him in her childish eagerness towards the door. And he, nothing loath to go, accompanied her.
Always a delicate creature,
Whom a breath might have withered.
but she had a large heart.
Why, so she had, you're right, Spirit. I am not gainsaying, oh God forbid.
She died a woman, and had, as I think, children.
One child.
True, your nephew.
Yes.
Although they had but that moment left the schoolyard, they now stood in the busy thoroughfares of the city. It was Christmas time again, but it was evening now and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped before a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. No, he was apprenticed here. They went in.
Oh, it's Fezziwig. Bless his heart, it's dear old Fezziwig, alive again.
Old Fezziwig put down his pen. Yo-ho, Ebenezer! Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice.
Oh, it's Dick Wilkins, must be his own, to be sure, there he is.
Oh, he was very much attached. He was Dick. Oh, poor Dick. Oh, dear, dear. Yo-ho! No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up before a man can say, Jack Robinson. You wouldn't believe how those two went to it. Hilly-ho, my lads, clear away, and let's have plenty of room. Hilly-ho, Dick. Ebenezer. Clear away. There is nothing they wouldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. They were done in a minute. In came a fiddler and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig with a vast substantial smile. In came the three Mrs. Fezziwigs, the
in came the 6 young followers whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. Some boldly, some shyly, some gracefully, some awkwardly. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. Away they all went, 20 couples at once, hands half round and back again, round the middle and up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate beauty. Oh, there were dances and more dances. There was cake, mince pies, plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came when old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. Oh, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. And if that's not high praise, tell me higher and I'll use it. All this while, Scrooge acted like a man out of his wits. He corroborated everything. He remembered everything. He enjoyed everything. And underwent the strangest agitation. It was only now, when the bright faces of his former self and Dick were turned from them, that he remembered the ghost, and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon its head burned very bright. A small thing to make these silly folks so full of gratitude. Small, Spirit, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money. Is that so much that he deserves this praise? It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. No, the happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. I should like to say a word or two to my clerk just now. My time grows short. Quick! This produced an immediate effect, for Scrooge saw himself again. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. His face had not the hard and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to show the signs of care and avarice. He was not alone, but stood by the side of a fair young girl, in whose eyes there were tears which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past.
It matters little. To you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in days to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve.
Well, what idol has displaced you?
A golden one. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off, one by one, until the master passion gain engrosses you. Have I not?
What then? If I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you, am I?
Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so. When it was made, you were another man.
I was a boy.
Your own feelings tell you that you were not what you are. I am. How often I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you.
Have I ever sought release?
In words, no.
In
never.
what then?
In a changed nature. In an altered spirit. I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were.
She left him, and they parted.
Spirit, show me no more.
Conduct me home.
Why do you like to torture me?
One shadow more.
No more. No more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more.
But the relentless ghost forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place. A room, not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like that last that Scrooge thought it the same, until he saw her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were more children than Scrooge in his agitated state of mind could count. They were not 40 children conducting themselves like one, but each child conducting himself like 40. And now the knocking was heard upon the door, and such a rush ensued to greet the father, laden with Christmas toys and presents. Oh, the joy, the gratitude, the ecstasy. They are all indescribable alike. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever, as the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside. And when Scrooge thought that such another creature, quite as graceful and full of promise, might have called him father, his sight grew very dim indeed. Spirit, remove me from this place.
I told you, these are but the shadows of the things that have been, that they are what they are, and do not blame me.
Remove me. I cannot bear it. Leave me.
No, take me back. Haunt me no longer. With a sudden action, Scrooge seized the extinguisher cap and pressed it firmly down upon its head. But though he pressed down with all his force, he could not hide the light which streamed out from under it in an unbroken flood upon the floor. He gave the cap a parting squeeze in which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel into bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.
Awakening in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore.
Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. He felt he had been restored to consciousness in the right nick of time for the especial purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger. He began to wonder which of his curtains this new spectre would draw back. So he put them every one aside with his own hands to challenge the spirit upon the moment of its appearance and not be taken by surprise. I don't mind calling on you to believe that he was ready for a good broad field of strange appearances, and that nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros would have startled him very much. However, being prepared for almost anything, he was by no means prepared for nothing. And when the bell tolled 1, and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went past, yet nothing came. All the while Scrooge lay upon his bed, a blaze of ruddy light streamed upon it, which, being only light, was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, as he was powerless to make out what it meant. At last, he began to think, however, that the source and season of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence it seemed to shine. He got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was upon the lock, A strange voice called him by his name and bade him enter. Scrooge obeyed. It was his own room. There was no doubt about that, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it seemed a perfect grove. A blazing fire went roaring up the chimney, and heaped upon the floor were mince pies, plum puddings, cherry cheap apples, red hot chestnuts, immense 12 cakes, and seething bowls of punch. On this couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch and held it high up to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door. Come in, man, and know me better. Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head before this spirit. He was not the dogged Scrooge he had been. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. Scrooge reverently did so. It was clothed in one simple green robe, bordered with white fur. On its head it wore a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its brown curls hung long and free as its genial face, its cheery voice, and its joyful air. You've never seen the like of me before. Never. Spirit, conduct me where you will. If you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it. Touch my robe. All vanished instantly, and they stood upon the city streets on Christmas morning. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad that the brightest summer sun and clearest summer air might have endeavored to diffuse in vain. For the people, shoveling away the snow on the rooftops, were jovial and full of glee, calling out to one another, and now and then exchanging a facetious snowball, laughing heartily when it went right, and not less heartily when it went wrong. But now the steeples called good people all to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets, dressed in their best clothes, and with their happiest faces. And at the same time, there emerged from scores of by streets, lanes, and nameless turnings, innumerable others, carrying their dinners to the bakers' shops. And the sight of these poor revelers appeared to interest the spirit very much, for he stood with Scrooge beside him in a baker's doorway, and lifting off the covers as the bearers went past, sprinkled incense on their dinners from his torch. And it was a very uncommon kind of torch, for once or twice when there were angry words between some dinner carriers who had jostled each other, he shed a few drops of water on them from it, and their good humor was restored directly, for they said it was a shame to quarrel on Christmas Day. And so it was. God love it, so it was. And perhaps it was the pleasure the good spirit had in showing off this power of his, or else it was his own kind, hearty, generous nature, and his love for all poor men that led him straight to Scrooge's clerks. For there he went, taking Scrooge with him, holding on to his robe. And on the threshold of the doorway, the spirit stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinkling of his torch. And now up rose Mrs. Cratchit, Bob Cratchit's wife, and laid the cloth, assisted by Miss Belinda Cratchit, the second of her daughters, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into a saucepan of potatoes. And now two smaller Cratchits, a boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they smelt the goose and known it for their own.
What has ever got your sorry, Tiny Tim. And Martha went this late last Christmas by half an hour,
said Mrs. Cratchit.
Here's Martha, Mother.
Said a young girl, appearing as she spoke.
Hurrah, here's Martha. Oh, Martha, Martha, there's such a goose, Martha.
Cried the two young Cratchits, who were everywhere at once.
Bless your heart alive, my dear. How late you are.
Said Mrs. Cratchit, kissing her a dozen times.
Oh, we had a deal of work to finish up last night, Mother, and had to clear away this morning.
Replied the girl.
Well, never mind. So long as you are coming. Whew. Sit you down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm. Lord bless you.
Oh no, there's Father coming. Hide, Martha, hide. So Martha hid herself, and in came little Bob, the father, with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim. He bore a little crutch and had his limbs supported with an iron frame. Oh, well, where's our Martha?
Not coming.
Not coming? Not coming on Christmas Day? Martha didn't like to see him disappointed, if it were only in joke. So she came out prematurely from behind the closet door and ran into his arms, while the two little Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim and bore him off into the wash-house that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper.
And how did little Tim behave?
As good as gold, and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much, and he thinks the strangest things you ever heard. Coming home, he told me that he hoped the people saw him in the church, because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant for them to remember on Christmas Day who it was that made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Bob's voice grew tremulous when he told them this, and it trembled even more when he said that Tiny Tim is growing strong and hardy. But now his active little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back came Tiny Tim before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to his stool before the fire. And while Bob compounded some mixture in a jug with gin and lemons, Master Peter and the two little Cratchits went off to fetch the goose, with which they soon returned in high procession. Such a bustle ensued, you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy, Miss Belinda sweetened the apple sauce, Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor, Martha dusted the hot plates, Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner of the table, the two little Cratchits set chairs for everybody, not forgetting themselves, and mounting guard upon their posts, crammed spoons into their mouths, lest they should shriek for goose before their turn came to be held. At last, the dishes were set on. Grace was said, which was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, looking all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the breast. But when she did, and the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight rose all around the board. That even Tiny Tim, excited by the two little Cratchits, beat upon the table with the handle of his knife and cried,
Hurrah!
There never was such a goose. Bob said he didn't think there ever was such a goose cooked. Everybody had enough, and in particular the two little Cratchits, who were steeped in sage and onions to the eyebrows. But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Mrs. Cratchit left the room to take up the pudding and bring it in. Oh, a wonderful pudding. Bob Cratchit said he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Everybody had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought that it was at all a small pudding for such a large family. At last, the dinner was done. The compound and the jug being tasted and considered perfect, the Cratchit family drew around the hearth. Bob proposed. A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. May God bless us.
God bless us, everyone.
Said Tiny Tim last of all. Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live. I see a vacant stool in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die. No, kind spirit, say that he will be spared. If he had been like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Scrooge hung his head to hear his words quoted by the spirit and was overcome with penitence and grief. Bob continued. Mr. Scrooge, I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon. And I hope he'd have a good appetite for it, too.
My dear, the children, Christmas Day.
Well, it should be Christmas Day, I am sure, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you, poor fellow.
Christmas Day?
I'll drink his health for your sake, and the day's, not for his. A long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt.
The children drank the toast after her. But Scrooge was the ogre of the family, and the mention of his name cast a dark shadow over the party that was not dispelled for a full 5 minutes. After it had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before. The chestnuts and the jug went round and round, and by, they had a song about a lost child traveling in the snow from Tiny Tim, who had a plaintive little voice, sang it very well indeed. There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from waterproof, and their clothes were scanty. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded, and looked happier yet in the bright sprinkling of the Spirit's torch, Scrooge had his eye on them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. By this time, it was getting dark and snowing pretty heavily. And it came as a great surprise to Scrooge, while listening to the moaning of the wind, and thinking what a solemn thing it was to move on through the lonely darkness, over an unknown abyss whose depths were secrets as profound as death. It came as a great surprise to Scrooge, while thus engaged, to hear a hearty laugh. It was an even greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room, with the Spirit standing smiling by his side, looking at that same nephew with approving affability. He said Christmas was a humbug. As I live, he believed it too.
That's more shame for him, Fred.
No, he's a
comical old fellow, and that's the truth, and not quite so pleasant as he might be. But his offenses carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him.
I'm sure he's very rich. At least you always tell me so.
But what of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use for him. He don't do any good with it. He don't make himself happy with it. And he hasn't the pleasure of thinking that he's ever going to benefit us with it.
No, I have no patience with him.
I have. I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself. Always. Look, he takes it into his head to dislike us. And he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He don't lose much of the dinner.
Indeed. I think he loses a very good dinner.
Well, I'm very glad to hear it. Well, I haven't much faith in these young housekeepers. What do you say, Topper? Topper had clearly got his eye on one of Scrooge's niece's sisters, for he said, bachelors are wretched outcasts and have no right to express an opinion on the matter. Whereat Scrooge's niece's sister, the one in the lace tucker, blushed. After tea, they had some music, and then they played at blind man's bluff. And I no more believe that Topper was really blind than I believe he had eyes in his boots. The way he went after that sister in the lace tucker was an outrage on the credulity of human nature. During this merrymaking, Scrooge had imperceptibly become immensely happy and light of heart. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in this mood, and looked upon him with such favor that Scrooge begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guest departed. But this the spirit said could not be, and the whole scene passed off in an instant. And Scrooge and the spirit embarked once more upon their travels. Far they went, and much they saw, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy ending. The spirit left his blessing and taught Scrooge his precepts. It was a long night, if it were only a night. But Scrooge had his doubts of this, for while he remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew older, clearly older. Are spirits' lives so short then? My life upon this globe is very brief. It ends tonight. Tonight, spirit? Tonight at midnight. The time is almost here. Forgive me, spirit, if I am not justified in what I ask. But I see something strange and not belonging to yourself protruding out from underneath your robe. Is it a foot or a claw? It might be a claw, for the flesh there is upon it. Look here. From out the foldings of its robe, it brought 2 children. Wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at its feet and clung upon the outside of its robe. O mankind, look down here. They were a boy and a girl, yellow and eager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, yet prostrate too in their humility. Where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its freshest tints, a stale and shriveled hand like that of age had pinched and twisted them and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat enthroned, devils lurked and glared out menacingly. Are they yours, Spirit? They are man's. This boy is ignorance. This girl wants. Beware of them both. But most of all, beware this boy. For on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Have they no resources, no refuge? Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked round for the ghost and saw it not. As the last stroke of 12 ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, moving like a mist along the ground towards him. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came, he knelt down upon his knees, for in the very air through which his spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible, save one outstretched hand. Its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread, for the phantom neither spoke nor moved. I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come. The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hand. You are about to show me the shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, Spirit? The upper portion of the garment contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received. Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any specter I have seen. But as I know it is your purpose to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? The finger pointed straight ahead. Read on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, Spirit. Lead on. The phantom moved away from him, and Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them. But there they were in the heart of it. The ghost stopped beside a little group of businessmen. Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead. When did he die? Last night, I believe. And what was wrong with him? I thought he'd never die. God knows. What has he done with his money? Left it to his business, I suppose. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know. Well, it's bound to be a very cheap funeral, for I don't know anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer.
Oh, I don't mind going if the lunch is served, but I must be fed.
Well, I'm the most disinterested among you, for I never wear black gloves and I never eat lunch. But I'll volunteer to go if anybody else will. Bye-bye.
Speakers and listeners strolled away. Scrooge knew the man, and he looked to the ghost for an explanation. Quiet and dark beside him stood the phantom with its outstretched hand. Scrooge fancied that the unseen eyes were looking keenly on him, and it made him shudder and feel very cold. They left the busy scene, and soon entered into an obscure part of the town where Scrooge had never been, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. Far in this den of infamous resort was a shop where old bones, bottles, rags, iron, and greasy offal were bought. Sitting in among the wares he dealt in was a gray-haired rascal. Scrooge and the spirit had no sooner come into the presence of this man than a woman carrying a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. And she had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too. And she was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment in which the old man joined them, they all broke into a laugh.
Let the charwoman alone to be the first,
Cried she who had entered first.
and let the laundress alone to be the second, and let the undertaker's been alone to be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance. If we have all three, we'd dead here without meeting it.
But it was the man in black who was the first to produce his plunder.
Seal or two, pencil case, pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch. Of no great value.
The items were severally examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give upon the wall.
Well, that's your account, and I wouldn't give another sixpence.
Who's next?
Mrs. Gilbert was next.
Sheets and towels, a little wearing the panel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots.
I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's how I ruined myself.
Now undo my bundle, Joe.
They had curtains.
Bed curtains.
You don't tell me you took them down, rings and all, with him lying there.
Oh, yes, I do. Why not?
You were born to make your fortune, and you'll certainly do it. His blankets?
Whose else's do you think? He isn't likely to take cold without him, my dear.
He didn't die of anything catching, I hope.
Oh, don't you be afraid of that. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. You can look through that shirt till your eyes ache and you won't find a hole in it nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me.
What do you mean, wasted of it?
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Somebody was fool enough to do it. I took it off them again.
He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive.
Profit us when he was dead.
I see. I see. The fate of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what's this? He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed. And lying upon it,
plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge looked to the ghost. Its steady hand was pointed at the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger on Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought how easy it would be to do, and he longed to do it. But he had no power to withdraw the veil. Still, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me. Oh, show me some tenderness connected with death, or this dark chamber will be forever present to me.
The ghost conducted him through several streets, until at last they entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, where they found the mother and her children gathered around the fire. Quiet. Very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were still as statues in one corner and sat looking up at Peter, who held a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing. But surely, it was very quiet. And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. Where had Scrooge heard those words? He had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out when he and the ghost crossed the threshold. Why did he not go on? The mother laid her work down upon the table.
The color hurts my eyes. They're better now. It makes them weak by candlelight. And I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time.
It's past it rather, Mother. But I think he's walked a little slower these last few days than he used to.
I have known him walk. I have known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder, very fast indeed.
And so have I, and so had all.
But he was very light to carry. His father loved him so. It was no trouble. No trouble. There's your father at the door.
She hurried out to meet him, and little Bob came in. His tea was ready for him, and they all tried who should help him to it most. And then the two little Cratchits got upon his knees and laid each child a little cheek against his face, as though they said, "Don't mind it, Father. Don't be grieved."
You went today, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I told him that we would walk there on Sundays. My little child. My little child.
He broke down at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, then he and his child would have been farther apart, perhaps, than they were.
They gathered around the fire, and Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew. For he's the kindest spoken gentleman you ever heard. "I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit," he said, "and heartily sorry for your good wife. If I can be of service in any way, pray come to me." It almost seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us.
I'm sure he's a good soul.
But I wouldn't be surprised if he got Peter a better situation. But, however, and whenever we part from one another, I
I am sure that we shall none of us ever forget poor Tiny Tim and this first parting that there was among us, shall we?
Never, Father.
And I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little child, that we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing so.
No, never, Father.
I am very happy. Mrs. Cratchit kissed him. His daughters kissed him. The little Cratchits kissed him. And Peter and himself shook hands.
Something tells me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it. I know not how.
Tell me, what was that man whom we saw lying dead? The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him as before into the resorts of businessmen, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on as to the end just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment. This court through which we hurry now is where my place of occupation is. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in the days to come. The ghost stopped, but pointed elsewhere. The house is yonder. Well, why do you point away? Still the finger pointed. Scrooge paused to look around.
A churchyard? Here then,
The wretched man whose name he was to learn lay beneath the ground. The ghost stood among the graves and pointed down to one.
before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be? Are they the shadows of the things that may be only?
Still the ghost pointed.
I, the man on the bed.
The ghost pointed from the grave to him and back again.
No, hear me still. I am not the man I was. Why show me all this if I am beyond all hope? Assure me, good spirit, that I yet may change these shadows by an altered life. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I shall not shut out the lessons that they teach. In his agony, he grasped the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him, holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed. He saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. And best, happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it's on my knees, oh Jacob, on my knees. His hands were busy with his garments all this while, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaking them, taking them apart into every kind of extravagance. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. Oh, I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything at all. I'm quite a baby. Oh, never mind. I'd rather be a baby. Oh, golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. Oh, what day is it today?
Eh?
What day is it today, my fine fellow?
Why, Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. Oh, the spirits have done it all in one night. Oh, they can do anything they like. Oh, of course they can. Of course they can. Oh, hello, my fine fellow.
Hello?
Do you know the poulterers on the next street but one at the corner?
I should hope I did.
Oh, an intelligent boy. A remarkable boy. Do you know if they sold the prize turkey that was hanging there? Not the little prize turkey, but the big one.
What? The one big as me?
Oh, what a delightful boy. Oh, it's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck.
It's hanging there now.
It is? Oh, go and buy it. Oh, Carl. Oh, no. I am in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here that I may give them the directions where to take it. Come back with the man and I will give you a shilling. Come back with him. In less than 5 minutes, I will give you half a crown. I have them send it to Broad Cratchit's. You know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Oh, what a wonderful knocker. I scarcely ever noticed it before. I shall love you as long as I live. Oh, there's the turkey. How do you do? A Merry Christmas to you. Oh, that is a turkey. He couldn't have stood on his legs, that bird. He'd have snapped them off short in a minute like sticks of sealing wax. Well, you can't carry that to Camden Town. You'll need a cab.
The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair and chuckled till he cried.
Shaving was not an easy task, for shaving requires attention, even if you don't dance while you're at it. At last, he got himself out into the streets. He had not gone far before he saw coming on towards him the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting house the day before. How do you do, sir? I hope you succeeded yesterday. Oh, it was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir. Mr. Scrooge? Yes, that is my name. And I am afraid it might not be very pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. And would you have the goodness to, Lord bless me, Mr. Scrooge, are you serious? If you please, not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor? My dear sir, I don't know what to say. Well, don't say anything, please. But come and see me. Will you come and see me? I will. Thank you. I'm much obliged to you. Thank you 50 times. Oh, God bless you, sir. Scrooge then turned his steps towards his nephew's house.
He walked past the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. But at last, he made a dash, and he did it. Is your master at home, my dear?
Yes, sir.
Where is he, my love?
He's in the dining room, sir, with mistress. I'll show you upstairs if you please.
No, thank you, my dear. He knows me. I'll just go up here. Fred! It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in? Let him in? It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. The niece looked just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the sister when she came. So did everybody when they came. A wonderful party. Wonderful games. Wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office the next morning. Oh, he was early. If he could only get there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming in late. That is what he had his heart set on. He did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. A quarter past. No Bob. He was for 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Hello? And what do you mean coming in at this time of day? I'm very sorry, sir. I am behind my time. You are? Yes, I think you are. Step this way, if you please. It's only once a year, sir. It won't be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir. But I'll tell you what. I am not going to stand for this sort of thing any longer. And therefore, I'm about to raise your salary. Bob got a little closer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it and calling to the people in the court for help in a straitjacket. A Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas, Bob, my fine fellow, than I have given you in many a year. I will raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family. And we shall discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a bowl of smoking bishop. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I of Cratchit. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he became a second father. He was as good a friend, as good a master, as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. There were those who laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and he little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, that some people did not have their share of laughter in the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins, as have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well if any man alive possessed the knowledge. And may that truly be said of us, and of all of us. And, as Tiny Tim observed,